Alex from Strava here, and I wanted to cover some of the basics of setting up your car for the track. So we're gonna talk through Scion FRS here, but this applies to a lot of the cars that are street cars, and then you decide to take them to a track. So let's go over the basics and what you should be looking for. We'll start with the most important, and that is making sure that you come out alive. So that's paramount. You're not gonna have any more track days unless you make it through the first one and you haven't had a major incident. So one of the ways to do this is to make sure that you have good tires. So we're running some Firestone tires on this particular car, but what you're looking for is obviously a tire that is not terribly worn out. A high performance summer tire is recommended for track use because otherwise you really grease it up. And even these high performance summer tires, they are not track tires. So make sure that you understand this is not an R compound. This is just a tire that, in a few laps of driven hard will start to get greasy as well, but it will allow you to enjoy the vehicle, especially if you're not trying to go for a particular time or a particular result. So make sure that your tires are in good shape. Also, make sure that they're inflated correctly. Now, when you're driving a car hard on track, your tire pressures will go up. It's not uncommon to start something like a 32 psi and end up around 40 psi. So keep that in mind. Set the pressures a little bit lower to begin with. You can start something like in the high 20s, low 30s, and monitor them throughout the day. After tires, another super important thing are brakes. Street cars do not have brakes that are designed to last on track. Unless you're buying something like a Porsche, a GT3 or something similar, these cars just were not designed to last on track for a long period of time. And it's a combination of components here that make the brake system capable, or rather incapable, of lasting on track. So first of all, the easy stuff. The brakes shed speed by basically absorbing a lot of heat energy into these rotors and then shedding that heat energy from the rotor. The heat is built up by the pads, which are here, obviously squeezing the rotor. Now, during this process, the pad material and the rotor itself will heat up. A dedicated track pad will have a material that is not so great when cold, doesn't have a great bite, but will stand up to more extreme temperatures, which you'll see on track. Now, on a street pad, you're going to basically burn up the pad. It's going to get soft. It's not going to last on a lot of these vehicles. So what you want to do is make sure that you have a good set of pads. We went with a Ferrotto DS2500 on this car. Now, this is somewhat vehicle specific. Some cars come with bigger brakes from the factory and you can go with a little bit less aggressive of a pad. This pad is not terribly aggressive. It's a cross. So you could use it on the street and you could use it on the track. This car is not super high power, so the speeds are not super high, and we can get away with it. Some testing, trial and error will help out here, but it's very important to ensure that you have a lot of pad material. I just changed these brakes front and rear with the same pad, and I know that there's a lot of pad material. Make sure you check before every track day. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that you have a brand new, recently flushed brake fluid. So super important. If you boil your fluid, if that fluid boils over, introduces gas into the hydraulic system, your pedal will go soft, you'll have a scary moment, not pleasant. So change your fluid. We recommend RBF 660 or RBF 600 and do so. Flush your brakes before the track event. You may want to have a little flush bottle, so you can do this, a one-person flush at the track if you suffer brake fade, but especially as a beginner, definitely make sure you have the best fluid in there possible. You're likely to overuse the brakes and you're likely to get them super hot. Other than that, obviously the rotor, make sure that it doesn't have cracking, which you may get over time with aggressive pads. Make sure there's, it's not too worn down, and so on. So other things, your suspension, we're starting with stock suspension in this car. That's fine. Don't jump into hyper modifying your car for a track event, because chances are that if you're just getting into it, you will not know how to set it up, for one thing, and secondly, you may not really reap the benefits. So you can start with the stock suspension on this particular car. And a lot of modern cars that are sporty, the suspension is adequate to deal with the first kind of track events and so on and so forth. Some of the small changes that we've done without altering too much is that you see these bolts right here. We've added a little bit of camber to the front. The reason why we've added a little bit of camber to the front is because on these vehicles from the factory, they have very little camber in the front, and that's great for tire wear, but that's great for tire when you're driving in a straight line on the interstate and so on. On the track, you're turning a lot. Now, when you're turning a lot, what happens is that you will load the outside edge of the tire, and then the tire will start rolling over, and then you'll damage just this edge of the tire as you're loading it. So a little bit of front camber, I recommend to start somewhere in the 2 and then move yourself up to 3 degree, depending on how advanced and how the particular car behaves. It's recommended. We're talking about brakes, so let's finish with that. One other addition that we've made to this car is that we've added some cooling ducts. Now, on this particular FRS and BRZ, you can basically attach the GT3 cooling ducts from the Porsche. Unlike most Porsche parts, these are super cheap. Like, you can get a set of GT3 ducts for just under $10. You can find them at ECS Tuning, you can find them at other shops, and they bolt up. They actually don't bolt up, they zap strap up to the control arm. I had to make a couple of extra holes in the duct itself, but they zap strapped really cleanly, and I used a little bit of tape here to close up the gaps in between the where the control arm comes out. But really a beautiful fit, and all this air that rushes its way into the braking system will help keep the rotor cool. I've also cut up this heat shield to help expose part of the rotor here and get more cooling. So this is a nice modification for your FRS, and it will really help keep the front brakes cool. Now, this is not just an FRS specific modification. Most vehicles you can do some sort of ducting. You can even make your own out of Kydex. So really effective way of keeping, especially stock hardware brakes. So these are a stock caliper and rotors. It'll help them last longer and stay cooler as you're directing air towards there. Other things, now that we've covered the safety of kind of yourself and your tires and your brakes, let's talk a little bit about the car. You might want to run a little bit thicker oil. So this car is spec'd for 0W20. I'm gonna run a 5W30 for the track in it. Might even go a little bit thicker than that. One way to see how well the oil is performing is by looking at the oil temperatures, and if they get super hot, your oil will thin out. So if you're going seeing at 260, 270 Fahrenheit oil temperatures, you really should consider to run a thicker oil and also an oil cooler. So that's something that we've done here. You can see in behind the grill, we've installed a Perrin oil cooler, and this should help keep the engine oil cooler and therefore help protect the bearings and the motor as during an extended session on track. Other things that we've done to this car that are not a necessity, but are nice to have. So we've done a set of headers on this vehicle. We've done a tune, and of course that's something that's our specialty. We've been tuning this car, and we'll continue to tune it. We've also done a crossover pipe in here, and this was the most recent addition. You can see it. It's a little dark right in there, and that crossover pipe is quite close to these suspension components. We've added some reflective tape on top where the bushing is to keep things happy. So these are some of the things that have allowed us to set up this car for some track usage. So keep in mind, street cars, their initial purpose or their main purpose, even sporty cars like this, is to be effective on the street and to be fun on the street. And when you start really beating on them on the track, you've got to make sure that you've got the basics, your tires and your brakes. And then start looking at adding power, start looking at adding a little bit of camber, start looking at suspension, what you want out of it. Sway bars, change the balance of the car. Coilovers, change the balance of the car. And really, you won't know how to best set that up until you have some seat time. So my recommendation is don't go crazy on the modifications right off the bat and get some seat time. You'll love it, you'll enjoy it, you'll fall in love with the car, you'll want to work on it more, and then you'll start to hone in on, hey, I need a little bit more dampening here, the track is bumpy, my rear end is a little bit too loose, I need to tighten that down, I'm getting too much understeer, and so on and so forth. So don't listen to everything that you see on YouTube. Get out there, get some seat time, get those safety parts in, and really enjoy your car on track. And once again, this doesn't just relate to this particular car. This relates to a lot of the cars that we tune, a lot of the cars that you guys drive, and a lot of the cars that we all enjoy. So get out there, enjoy, stay safe.